Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Phantom Nebula Radio, and we are back. Me and my co-host Miguel. I don't know if anybody was familiar with our last incarnation on Blog Talk Radio. It was called Dark Matter Radio, and it'll be a similar sort of subject matter, except this time a little bit more advanced and a little bit more thought put into it, and a little bit more time, as we've had a lot of time to seize and think about when we come back to radio. Anything goes on this station. We discuss the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal, anything from time travel to actual physics and science, to aliens and alien abductions, to Bigfoot, to chupacabras, to crop circles, and anything you can think of under the sun. We have totally unscreened open lines throughout the course of every single show that we'll be hosting from now on. That means that if you have any interest in calling in and sharing us your experiences with whatever you have had, whether you have an experience with paranormal or the supernatural, or if you just want to comment on whatever we're talking about at the current time, we don't screen our calls, meaning that yours is a safe place for anyone to add in their opinion, whether we agree with it or not. We do not claim to be experts. My co-host Miguel is currently working towards his bachelor's in physics, so he does have a background. And our other co-host, who unfortunately cannot be with us tonight, Andrew, is also working towards his master's in psychology. So we have actually a wide variety of background, but we do not ever claim to be experts. Tonight's show, we decided to focus on something that was very popular the last time we were on Dark Matter Radio, and that is Area 51, which is such a wide variety of topics.
All right, that's going to be a long
time. Which is such things as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is the base that hosts Area 51. We're going to talk about Bob Lazar, who is a alleged person who worked at Area 51. We're going to be talking about Majestic 12. We're going to talk about the Roswell incident, Serpo Project, and more, and even the Shadow Government. So, Miguel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. If any of you guys remember me, I was a high school senior when we last spoke on Dark Matter Radio. Ever since then, I have not only began college, but I've also graduated with my associates in physics, and now I'm currently working my way up to my bachelor's at Johns Hopkins University. I'm also very interested. I mean, just like Pete, I mean, we're best friends. We share the same interests and everything. I mean, we both have taken interest in the supernatural, the unexplained, pseudosciences, things of that nature. Now, we agreed on Area 51 and other related incidents as our primary topic for tonight, as an introductory show to kind of get us back into the swing of things. I do also have to note that I do have a friend who may or may not be joining us as another co-host sometime in the future if he has the time. But I mean, this whole field of study, the whole Area 51, the Roswell incident, everything surrounding that is definitely one of the biggest topics surrounding paranormal and UFO kind of studies, and it's also the subject of a lot of conspiracy theories, cover-ups, and there's definitely, in my opinion, definitely something that has been going on for this whole topic that we don't obviously know about, and that's why it takes such interest to me. I believe that personally, as a scientist, that no good scientist at least, should ever be satisfied with the explanation he's given. You never say, that's it, that's the way it is, that's the way things are. You always want to keep asking questions. You don't want to, reject everything either, but at the same time, you always want to keep asking questions. Another thing, you never take anything for granted, and you never belittle any belief. That being said, Pete, would you want to just get right into the swing of the topic today, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got my coffee ready and everything, so I'm absolutely ready to dig into this topic. And it's been this whole situation with Area 51 or Groom Lake or Hangar 18 or whatever you want to call it has been going on since Roswell. If anyone, to those of you who are not familiar with what Area 51 is, it's a detachment of Edwards Air Force Base in Nevada. The correct name is Area 51 Facility and Nevada Test and Training Range and Groom Lake. Though the name Area 51 has actually been used. Other names used for the facility have included Dreamland, Paradise Ranch, Home Base, Watertown Strip, and most recently, Hornyport Airport. It's in Nevada. It has been the subject of several conspiracy theories and an essential component to most UFO folklore. It was used in World War II as a Air Force auxiliary field, and it pretty much at that point was only 2 dirt runways, and it was used for mainly bombing and artillery practice because there are bomb craters still kind of peppered around the facility at that point. The major thing, which probably started the rumors of why this was associated with UFOs and UFO-related incidents, was because it was used for the U-2 program. The U-2 program was a strategic reconnaissance aircraft that was used to fly primarily to Russia and Russian associated allied nations such as the Eastern Bloc and more, and to take pictures. It's pretty much was a early spy plane, and that's about it. What even furthered this was the SR-71 Blackbird, which Miguel, you're probably the one that could probably give us the better explanation of the SR-71 Blackbird, and then following the development of the F-117, the world's first prototype stealth fighter.
Yeah, Pete, actually, if you wouldn't mind, I have a list right in front of me. I just to like beforehand to give a very brief rundown of all the aircraft associated with Area 51 or claimed to have been associated with Area 51, if that's all right by you.
Sure. Go ahead.
All right, so right here, I'm on this actually really useful website. If anyone's interested, it's called area51zone.com, one word. I actually don't believe the website's around anymore because I couldn't find it. However, if you go on archive.org and you type in area51zone.com, it has absolutely everything that was on the website. Now, the short list here starts off with the U-2 spy plane. As Pete mentioned, the U-2 spy plane, which was it was how do I explain this? A Cold War era early surveillance aircraft. Long story short, it was the first spy plane. It was the first aircraft that we designed specifically to fly at extremely high altitudes and take pictures of any enemy military facilities. Now, the U-2, essentially, imagine a very, very narrow, quiet aircraft with an extremely long wingspan. Now, it wasn't meant to fly fast, just, meant to cruise very high altitudes. The pilots, wore special pressurized suits. Because of the fact that it was developed in the midst of the Cold War, it became a very, it was kept under wraps, is what I'm trying to say. The project, the aircraft itself was painted black in order to blend in at night, with non-reflective paint. But that was the original spy plane. After the failure of the U-2 to successfully spy on the Cubans during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I shouldn't say the failure, but originally the U-2 was meant to be too high to be shot down. That was the big claim to fame about the U-2. However, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of them actually was shot down and the pilot captured. Now, that being said, the United States Air Force upgraded. They started a new program for a new so-called black aircraft, as we're going to call these. They're not necessarily all black. However, they are all top secret at one point or another aircraft. The next one is called the SR-71. It was developed and primarily used during Vietnam. In fact, I know this is going to sound a little bit cliche, but it might, kind of help liken this a little bit for some of our listeners. If you ever played, I've never played the new one, but if you played the original Call of Duty Black Ops, a Blackbird is an SR-71. That is the name of the aircraft, an SR-71 Blackbird. It's it's a delta wing aircraft, which means that it's capable of very, very high speeds. It's actually a very large aircraft if you ever see one in person. Very skinny. They have very little wind resistance, able to hit incredibly high speeds at incredibly high altitudes. Like I said, they were primarily used during Vietnam. During the 90s, they were decommissioned. However, I believe 2 SR-71s were recommissioned in the late 90s in order to search for, I believe it was a senator or someone whose aircraft crashed in Alaska, something like that. I don't think they ever found him. He probably died. But the SR-71, in other words, hasn't been used in a while, or so we believe. Nowadays, surveillance aircraft have been replaced with satellite reconnaissance, which can get all the accuracy, all the clarity, and they're a lot less detectable than black aircraft. That being said, with the end of the development of the SR-71, the SR-71 was one of our first stealth aircraft that we tried to design. It was black. The panels were designed. If you take a look at the vertical stabilizers, they're designed at a certain angle at which to reflect radar waves. Now, the aircraft that we developed following this, in order specifically for the purpose of being an attack aircraft, was the F-117. Now, the F-117, if you've seen it, the pilots nicknamed it the Cockroach. It's a very ugly-looking aircraft. It looks like a weird-shaped, bent pyramid with little wings sticking out of it. It's an ugly little thing. It's actually not really a fighter aircraft. It's more of an attack aircraft. I don't believe it even has the capability to go supersonic, and if it does, it's very, very low supersonic capability. I'm not 100% sure if it's true or not, but I remember hearing a rumor that the F-117 was actually incapable of flying on its own, everything manually controlled. It needed computer systems to write its flight in order to keep it stable. In other words, a pilot would not be able to do it with manual controls and manual input. Now, the F-117 I remember there was a big base of them out somewhere in New Mexico. They were used, I remember, definitely over the Balkans, where one of them was shot down and is now in a museum somewhere in Serbia. At least I believe that's the country. There's so many of them now, I've lost track. But there was an F-117 that was shot down. It was used in Operation Desert Storm, I want to say. It was used in several wars. It's long story short, it was a very, very stealthy aircraft, very difficult to see. The actual description right here on the website is that it's so stealthy it has the radar cross section of a marble. Whether that's true or not, I really don't know. I mean, I've been in this. I've had such an interest in aviation and aircraft for so long that I've read a lot of claims about radar cross-section. I've heard that the F-22 has the radar cross-section of a bird. I've heard that the F-22 has a radar cross-section of a fly. I've heard the same thing about the F-35, the F-117. But long story short, on radar they appear very, very, very small, if at all. Now, following the F-117, we wanted to develop a true stealth fighter. Now, I shouldn't say true stealth fighter, but a true fighter designed for stealth. This fighter is what we now know as the F-22. Now, with a lot of these black aircraft, after so long, they all become declassified. It happens. We're not going to keep, military secrets from the Civil War thinking they have any bearing today. The U-2 it's old technology, but the F-22. Now, this was declassified, I believe, in the late 90s. It was actually developed by Lockheed Martin, which is a very, very, very famous aircraft brand. They make a lot of military aircraft along with Northrop Grumman and Boeing. And the F-22 was actually designed to be as fast as maneuverable, if not more maneuverable than our current air superiority fighters, such as the F-15 and F-16, as well as more stealthy than the F-117. Now, if you look at the F-22, it actually looks like just a regular aircraft. It doesn't look any different than the F-15, except it has a little bit more, different curves. It employs new technology such as thrust vectoring turbine outlets, which allow it to maneuver a little bit better. However, as mentioned, the big advantage of the F-22 was its stealth capabilities. Now, Lockheed Martin has a branch known as Skunk Works. Skunk Works is the same branch that developed the SR-71. They've developed a lot of top-secret aircraft before, and they were responsible for the F-22. Now, the F-22 was supposedly underwent testing at the Groom Lake facility at Area 51. Now, it was in a competition against Northrop Grumman's YF-23 back when they were in their prototype phase. The F-22 won out, and now it's our new air superiority fighter. It's actually believed it's on the cutting edge of stealth technology nowadays, even some 10 years after it entered service. There's actually a recent story I read in which, I don't know whether it's true or not, I don't know, but where an Iranian F-4 Phantom, designed, made by an American company back in the Vietnam War, was mainly employed by us, intercepted a U.S. drone, a Predator. Now, the Predator was being used for surveillance. When the Predator was intercepted by this F-4, claiming that it was over Iranian airspace, whether or not it was, again, I don't know. The F-4 pilot looked over on his wing, hadn't even realized there was an F-22 escorting this UAV, which then told him that he should probably go home. Never even saw it on radar, never even knew it was there, even from several feet away, did not even know the F-22 was there until the F-22 pulled up right next to him.
Yeah,
so,
no, I'm not trying to interrupt you. Just when you're talking about the F-22, it just reminded me at the did you tell anybody what the price tag of the F-22 is? It's this is the brilliant American defense budget at work, and how much we really like to spend our money correctly.
I believe a while back it was around $186 million per aircraft. Something like that.
Aircraft. Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe that was once production had ensued and production costs were starting to go down. That happens typically. The aircraft starts off at a very high price. I believe the F-22 was originally around $300-something million a piece. Eventually, we were supposed to build 300-something of them. That was eventually cut down to the high 180s somewhere that we now have employed in service. I mean, it's staggering. I mean, granted, America, we're number one, we got to protect the world. We have the world's most advanced, powerful military. But if you look at the numbers and see truly how much we spend on the military, it's absolutely astonishing. I mean, there's graphs of how much of your dollar goes to this, and that. Each tax dollar you spend goes to, 2 cents to this, 5 cents to that. The most sizable chunk of the dollar bill, straight to military. I believe it was about approximately half of every tax dollar spent goes straight to military.
We spend about
go on.
Anywhere between six. According to the official budget of 2012, or I'm guessing you can consider it somewhat of a budget. we spend $553 billion. But that doesn't include all of these black projects that are off the books and not included in the defense spending. So I would estimate our defense spending somewhere around $750 billion to almost even $1 trillion.
And you also have to consider too, how much these black projects really cost. Sure, F-22 costs you a couple $100 million, a tank costs you, I don't know, a couple million, whatever, blah blah blah. Think about aircraft such as the B-2 bomber, the Flying Wing. Take a guess about how much you would say that would cost. Throw me out a number, Pete.
I have a general idea of what they would cost because just of knowing about these things. But I'm going to say $500 million each, I would have to say.
$500 million each. I'm trying to see right now if I can actually pull up. Well, this website's not going to work for me. However, if I recall correctly, it was somewhere along the lines of $1.4 billion apiece.
Right now, I'm looking at the unit cost, but this is 1997 cost, so it's got. So your number would probably be a little bit more correct. $737 million per. But yeah,
right. I could have been thinking 1.14, but it was nowadays adjusted for inflation well over $1 billion.
Easily.
It's a very expensive aircraft. We only have 21, or I believe we had 21 of them in our arsenal. One of them crashed. There goes all our taxpayer dollars. $1 billion of them, right all over the shores of Guam or Guadalcanal or whatever it crashed. I believe it was Guam actually. Now, do you mind if I keep going on with the other aircraft we have on here, Pete?
I think I'm not trying to. I think that people get the idea of how shady this place is in terms of where we develop our black aircraft. I'd like to get into the discussion of I would guess as I would put it, the meat and potatoes of everything. The aliens, the secret things that have been done there, so here are just some of the assumptions that are going on at this place. I think that the storage and examination and reverse engineering of crashed alien spacecraft go on here. Meetings with extraterrestrials, the development of exotic energy weapons, development of weather control, which I actually have not heard that Area 51 is involved with that. I always thought that it was maybe like Aurora, which is HARP actually, which is
in Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The development of time travel and teleportation, development of exotic propulsion systems, and also activities related to a supposedly shadowy one world government or Majestic 12. What do you think about all of these typical accusations of the Groom Lake facility, as also known as Area 51?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I truly believe there's a lot more going on than we're aware of. That being said, I know there's black project accusations, there's alien accusations, there's exotic weaponry accusations. That being said, I honestly believe that the U.S. government is not dumb enough to put all their eggs in one basket. Now, metaphorically, that means that they're putting essentially everything so-called top secret in one facility. Let's assume Area 51 is the location of A, black aircraft, B, extraterrestrial communications, C, exotic weaponry, and D, some sort of early beginnings of a new world order. If that's the case, that's all in one location. Let's assume that the impossible happens and someone somehow manages to extract data, be able to hack into the system, find out everything that's going on there. There's all of your secrets, conspiracies you're trying to hide, all in one location, all out there. I personally believe, granted, the black aircraft we know of. The alien one, honestly, I mean, I'm a little bit skeptical on, based on what I've read. However, I wouldn't rule it out. But, I mean, to put it all in one location, and especially one location that the U.S. government is well aware is very widely publicized and very, very close. I shouldn't say closely monitored, but it's a tourist destination. People want to go there to see Area 51. They want to see the guards. They want to walk up to the perimeter and take pictures of the signs that say, hey, go any further and you're going to get killed. People want to do that. But then again, I mean, maybe you could consider that Area 51 could be a ploy. Maybe Area 51 is very closely guarded and used only to test certain aircraft in order to divert attention from a different location, And yeah, go on.
It's actually ironic that you just said that because Justin in chat just said that. I'll direct quote it. He said, "I've always wondered if Area 51 was just a place of interest to pull attention away from other more dangerous possibilities. I have no real theory, just a thought." And that's actually, I always said I would address it. Actually, that's actually a really good point. There's so much attention on Area 51 and what's in store that maybe that their testing is done elsewhere. We all know that there has been several discoveries of underground bunkers and stuff like that of governments that was government controlled from the 60s to 70s. Wasn't there a house that was discovered in maybe about the past 15 years that was like it was an alternative to Cheyenne Mountain where the Senate could be stored if in the case of a nuclear attack or something like that. The government's really good at hiding places. They're really good at building underground facilities is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, actually, Area51zone.com is what gave me the inspiration for that diversion idea. They do have a page there called Area 19. Now, I haven't exactly read along, the whole article for a while, so I'm going to be paraphrasing a little bit here. However, they mentioned that Area 19 and Area 20 were added to the Nevada test site area in the 60s, and I believe, what were they being used for? Let's see over here. There was a mysterious power line that terminated supposedly right where it was. Yet there's supposed to be nothing in the area. However, there's a power line that leads to somewhere. Let's see. There's an airspace supposedly right over it. However, Area 19 was supposedly used for nuclear testing. Yet there have supposedly been very few to no recorded underground nuclear explosions, but a lot of drilling, according to this. Now, and so what they're trying to get at is there's not exactly enough to point the finger directly, hey, this is the real Area 51, but it's just another location that has its little quirks about it. Like I said, a power strip that leads to nowhere. A lot of drilling and no nuclear blasts. Airspace available directly over it. I mean, supposedly a lot of, potentially a lot of underground things going on. Let's see, there's a story here called the Cheshire Airstrip, supposedly told by a commercial pilot who flew in a nearby airline. Now, when the pilot first prepared to land, this is a quote directly off the website, first he had to get clearance that there weren't any spy satellites over Area 19. Then the runway, which was disguised to look like the ground, was watered by sprinklers. That made the runway stand out. The pilots got off and had to quickly get back on. The complex that the pilot entered was built to look like a series of hills. The problem with this story is that enemy satellites can see in multiple wavelengths. They usually see through most camouflage, and maybe the government had some sort of high-tech camouflage, blah, 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 whatever. Plus, with the airspace right over it, the facility would have had to have been noticed by someone. So supposedly, a pilot had to make a landing at this location, and they made some sort of impromptu runway out of sprinklers, and there were hidden facilities in there that he noticed. That's the Cheshire Airstrip story. There's really nowhere in there's really no hard evidence to point to this being any sort of real Area 51. In fact, the lack of an airstrip pretty much tells me you right off the bat that there's no aircraft testing going on there. However, I just thought it would be an interesting topic to bring up.
Oh, absolutely. And all right, it's been about half an hour into the broadcast, so we're going to take just a short, about 3-4 minute, 5-minute break, and then we'll get back. And when we get back, we're going to talk. I'd like to talk about Majestic 12 and their possible influence with the shadow government and their possible connection to Area 51. All right, everybody, and we're back. Enjoyed our bumper music. All of those can be found online for free, royalty free. Those two tracks were titled Orange Skies was the second one, and bumper music. I almost read it like it was right off the switchboard. That was very dumb of me. That first one was called Robotic Arena. So, Miguel, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about. But I'd like to actually first, who we completely forgot, Miguel.
What's that?
We completely forgot to talk about Bob Lazar.
Oh yeah, we did. Do you want to mention that? Because I don't have his page up right now. I have the ones you just recently sent me.
That's okay. I can talk. I'll as the main idea of this is to educate people on all of these interesting topics that we've been discussing and things that we can talk about. So I'll just give a good brief overview of his claims, his notoriety, and such, and then we could talk about them and see if anyone wants to add their thing or their comments in chat. Again, now that we're back from break, I want to also add that our switchboard is unscreened open lines, that if you have ever had any sort of experience with extraterrestrials, the supernatural, the paranormal, the unexplained, and the mysterious, you're welcome to dial in, and you're welcome to voice yourself as we see fit. This is a no judgment zone. We will never ever laugh or make light of anything you claim, and we're here just to listen and for you to share your story. Okay, now back to Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar is a very controversial individual, even in the ufology field. His claims are that he was a scientist and an engineer that allegedly worked with ET technology at a site called S4, which is part of the whole Area 51 test facility. He claimed to have worked there in the late 80s as a physicist at the S4 complex. S4, as according to him, is a hidden military base for the study and research of extraterrestrial spacecraft and reverse engineering their technology. He says he saw several different ET vehicles here or there, and he talked about their mode of propulsion. And he also called the one disc-shaped vehicle he called the quote-unquote sport model, which is pretty interesting. He now on a little bit of a downside on why he's a controversial figure. His credibility was challenged. That his schools that he said he kind of attended didn't have a record of him, while other people in the scientific community had no memory of ever even meeting him. His supporters, though, counter that his credentials and histories were sabotaged to create the very questions of credibility. And I will like to add that is a complete possibility of, as we all know the government is shady. We don't need to reiterate that on this program, though we will, I'm sure. He claims that he went to California Institute of Technology, and he also attended MIT. But his major claims were that he, besides the encountering dead test aircraft, he says he worked at Los Alamos, and which is the physics facility, and he worked at the particle accelerator there. He says that there is an historical involvement of extraterrestrials with this planet for the past 100,000 years. He claims that these beings allegedly originate from the Zeta Reticuli system, and also referred to as Zeta Reticulans. Actually, we probably would do a whole program on just that topic, the Zeta Reticulans, because those are involved in a lot of ufology topics. They'll actually come up soon in Project Serpo, I believe, and they're also involved with such things as the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, he also talks about things like materials and materials that have never been discovered yet that are made out of things on the periodic table, elements of the periodic table that have never been discovered yet and don't kind of quite belong on the periodic table. He claims that the element 115 used as nuclear fuel. He claims that it has anti-gravity effects, the effects of proton bombardment, and also with antimatter. It has a strong nuclear force and needs to be amplified to result in the large gravitational effect, which would be a warping or distortion of the space-time. That is a mouthful of a sentence, and I'm not sure if that even makes any remote physics sense. So first, before I defer to you, my question is to you, Miguel. As first, what do you think of his claims? What do you think of the fact that if his credibility has been wiped or he had no credibility at all in the first place? And then let's go and we'll have you talk about the physics ends because I'm physics handicapped.
All right. So the first of all, the claims of his credibility. Honestly, I mean, I have a little bit of working knowledge on Bob Lazar, and even before, I mean, when I knew what the whole claims he made were, even before I've heard the whole, he's controversial because nobody knows about him, his credibility isn't there, blah, blah. Even before that, I immediately said right off the bat, watch, nobody's going to know about him, nobody's going to claim to have, gone to his, that this school, earned this degree, because I know right off the bat that could possibly have been what happened. I mean, think about it. Someone says, someone goes out, starts making claims about, your government facility that he worked at, whatever, blah, 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 starts giving up secrets. What would be the logical course of action? Make him disappear and vanish, and then all of a sudden, oh, hey, where is he? Gee, I wonder what happened. Or just somehow, sabotage any and all credibility that he had. I mean, it's the logical option for someone to undertake in a situation like that. So now Bob Lazar, I mean, to be honest, there's so many ifs about the situation that I can't lend it any credibility, nor can I take any credibility away from what he says. I literally cannot accept nor reject anything he says because of all the what ifs. There's so little confirmed knowledge in our Area 51 arsenal or our, top secret government arsenal that we can actually, lend or detract any credibility from his claims. I mean, to be honest, if you were to give me a pen and paper right now and say, here, look, I promise, I'll get your name in the news. I want you to make up the most intricate story about Area 51 you can make. I mean, or any sort of top-secret government facility, I could probably come up with a pretty convincing story. Keep it rational, not too crazy out of the world. Oh, yeah, these flying saucers could go through time and space, and, we use them to bomb the Russians, but, so Russia doesn't exist anymore. It's just a ploy by the U.S. government to keep you scared like in 1984. He didn't go directly overboard with that, so we don't know we know he's not probably some crazy, I was abducted by aliens and that's why my wife left me kind of guy. But at the same time, like I said, I just can't lend him any credibility at all over that because honestly that's all the stuff we kind of suspected anyway. Now about the claims of physics that he's kind of trying to explain here. Anti-gravity and using energy as a source of weaponry. It's all honestly backed by pretty rational science. Anti-gravity, for example, has been experienced. I shouldn't say directly against gravity. However, we can use electromagnetic fields and superconductors to suspend and lift objects. If you've ever seen this very famous clip of scientists actually suspending a frog in midair using superconductors. That being said, as a scientific community, we really don't have all that working of a knowledge of gravity. We have a pretty good working knowledge on atomic structure, nuclear forces, a decent amount on electromagnetism. I mean, we really haven't discovered any sort of there's theorized gravitons and particles. However, gravity itself can't really be described, such as like matter can with a Higgs boson. We really don't have a discovered particle that can describe gravity, or at least to my knowledge, we don't. From what I've studied, we do know gravity is exponentially a weaker force than electromagnetism, and supposedly I believe there's a theory that gravity extends into other dimensions, and that's why it's so much, it's so much weaker. And the point is that gravity and gravity weapons and anti-gravity, it's all such a mysterious topic in the scientific community. I shouldn't say mysterious, but unexplored topic, that we really don't have a working knowledge to either claim or reject these assertions. For all we know, all this past century where we've been focusing on electromagnetism as our fuel for every day, and electromagnetism as our to power our machines and our weapons and everything, maybe there could have been an alien species that instead of focusing on electromagnetism was focusing on gravity. There was actually a book. I don't even really remember the author now. Pete, do you remember the author of Ruled Britannia? The book I lent you a while back?
Harry
Turtledove. Yeah,
I've read
right.
so much of this stuff.
He wrote a short story on, I have it actually downloaded on my iPad, regarding an alien species that comes to Earth and essentially dominates and enslaves us, and essentially strip mines the entire planet using advanced weaponry that is based essentially on gravity over electromagnetism. This could be the case. Or, for all we know, they could use electromagnetism as a source of anti-gravity. Like I said, superconductors. Now, his other claim that element 115 was used as a nuclear fuel. Now, I'm not really a chemist. I'm not a chemistry major. However, a short search will show you that unipentium, which is element 115, is, any element over, I believe it's 90-something, I really don't even remember. One of those higher-up elements, everything over that is all synthetic. It's nothing that can be found in nature, or at least nothing that can be permanently found in nature, unless there's just some way to develop it we haven't encountered. Yes.
I believe it's over. I think because bismuth is naturally occurring. I think anything over 99, I believe, is because it starts with Einsteinium.
Yeah.
Right now we're up to 118 to 117. But there are a few between the 40s and the 90s that can be produced and usually are produced through synthesis, since they are only trace quantities. That includes plutonium, americium, berkelium, californium, stuff like that. But sorry for interrupting. You can proceed.
It's fine. A lot of these synthetic elements, though, because of the fact that they can very, very scarcely, first of all, they're very scarcely stable. This is due to the fact that an element's number is measured by the amount of protons that are contained within the nucleus. Now, these nucleons, or I believe they're called nucleons or nucleoids, something like that, protons and neutrons, hold each other together through something called the Coulomb force. The Coulomb force is a very strange curve that holds things together at a certain close distance, yet once you expand that distance, they actually start to repel. That's why protons, being of the same charge, can hold on to neutrons without repelling other protons away. Now, that being said, that is also a key facet in nuclear fusion. You need to overcome that repulsion and get two elements close enough to each other with so much energy to hold them so close together that the Coulomb force can actually combine the nuclei. Now, the amount of energy to do so is very, very high, and energy, if you're in the study of physics, pretty much directly translates to heat. So that's why a great deal of heat and force, energy, whatever is required to achieve nuclear fusion. And for all the energy that does give us, we can't find a way to put in less energy than we get out yet. So that's a little, interesting tangent for you guys, though. But all those heavier elements, though, are very unstable. So there's very little that we can actually study about them if we are able to develop them in the first place. If just looking at the page for element 115, appearance, unknown, name, symbol number, just generic unipentium, unknown, category. There's a lot of stuff unknown about it. Now, to be honest, as a personal scientific opinion, I would believe a lot of these synthetic metals, these synthetic elements, really probably don't have many practical uses. I honestly don't believe one day we're going to discover some sort of element, in the 140, 150 category, and also be like, oh, hold on, this element here can let us time travel or something like that. I really don't think something like that's ever going to happen. If you look at all the discovered elements that we have and all of their properties, there's really, very few that really hold any redeeming qualities other than the unstable nuclear isotopes that allow us to make nuclear power. Now, that being said, unipentium doesn't look to be any exception, especially, because we are pretty much right on the cusp of really exploring these synthetic elements. As time goes on, we do more and more research. We discover more synthetic elements. We start to understand them a lot better. And I think, honestly, since we're so close on the cusp of discovering or studying elements such as unipentium, I really don't think we're going to find anything special about it at all. However, the really going back to his claims, there have been, a lot of people have theorized that if we would have some sort of anti-gravitational, ship, some sort of vessel, that there really would be very little use for aerodynamics. That being said, it kind of makes it a little bit intuitive that you would design a circular aircraft, a very plain, featureless aircraft, doesn't require airfoil.
Actually, wait, just to actually have a caller, a friend of mine that wants to talk about his credibility as a scientist, I suppose. And then
yeah, sure.
as soon as we're done with his question or comment, and then we can shift towards discussing why extraterrestrials seem to have the most ridiculous ship designs ever imaginable. All right.
Okay.
Rob, you're on air.
Oh, hey. I guess this isn't so much directly about Lazar's credibility, but it's more or less just talking about how his credibility is kind of shattered slightly. I'm pretty sure you guys don't need to be informed about Project MK Ultra, right?
Oh, are you alluding to the same thing that was in that movie, Men Who Stare at Gold, right? The CIA brainwashing program?
Pretty much, yeah. The one where they would use drugs and these things would be done without consent.
Oh, yep. I'm absolutely familiar with that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, most of the reports that were, or most of the files and stuff related to it were destroyed were ordered to be destroyed by the CIA. So who's to say that all this guy's credibility and stuff, whether or not he has it or not, who's to say he didn't have it? And then these organizations and stuff, the government didn't order that stuff to be classified and or destroyed, so we'd have nothing to stand on.
No, that's actually, now that I think about it, that's actually a really, really good point. Miguel, what do you think about that? Because I can actually really see a completely feasible scenario. I think that the government is well within its rights to silence anyone who would like to whistle on anything that they can even remotely get their hands on, as we've seen with Edward Snowden and Bradley Manning. So what do you think about that plausible, very, very plausible scenario?
Oh, yeah, precisely. That was, sort of what I was trying to allude to before when I was talking to his credibility. Another thing I actually thought of, since we already, know hey, like I said, that if anyone decides to speak out, tell everyone what we're doing, we're going to completely destroy your credibility. The other thing I was considering, maybe that not even this was the potential destruction of his credibility wasn't even necessarily a response to his whistleblowing activities, but yet a precaution for any workers on top secret facilities like that. Say, for example, you want to work at our facility, you want to be on our amazing, technically non-existent budget. However, in order to do so, you're sacrificing, we know your credibility, which is why you're working here. However, we are going to go to the university that you received your degree from, and we are going to tell them that you never attended this university. We're going to go to, other scientists who've signed off on theses with you, and we are going to tell them, look, this is your work and your work alone. No one else helps you out with this. We're going to destroy all shred of evidence that you are a credible scientist, that you are a credible individual, on the off chance that you decide to speak up afterwards. That again, like I said, I believe is another possibility. We supposedly, we haven't heard of any credible scientists in the past saying, oh yeah, I got my PhD in quantum mechanics at Princeton, and then I decided to go work at Area 51 for a couple of years. We don't hear anyone saying that. For all we know, all the people who we deem crazy saying, I've been to Area 51, I know what goes on there, could have at one point or another been credible scientists who had their reputation destroyed upon deciding to work there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Rob. And now Miguel even threw us even deeper down the rabbit hole, saying that anyone who could possibly have worked there might have agreed to something like this. So, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that's pretty much it. He's said just about anything I could have thought of.
All right, thank you very much for calling, and I really appreciate it, because that just kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, that is a very, very plausible answer to why his credibility was actually challenged. When you were talking about why their craft is circular, wouldn't that be? Isn't it that it's not even necessary to have an aerodynamic design in space, because there's no friction in space and there's no air in space, so there's no point in having a aerodynamic design in space. And not only that, I think that I did watch a program or a documentary talking about how a superconductor needs to be in a circle, and that's what causes the anti-gravity for an alien craft, and that is why they're usually portrayed as circles. But let's go back to your thought on what you were about to say, and then in a few minutes we can take another quick break.
Well, what I was actually mentioning regarding the shape, the two commonly most cited shapes of aircraft are circular or rod-shaped. There's additionally been cases where people reported seeing triangles and the like. However, circles and rods are typically the two most common claims. Now, as we both mentioned, shape really doesn't have anything to do with. You don't need aerodynamics when you're going through space. When you can turn on a dime and completely defy the laws of momentum, you're just looking for whatever design is going to give you the most space in the interior for storage, for food and supplies and oxygen or whatever the hell it is that they breathe. That's all you're pretty much looking for. And if you truly think about it, being circular shaped would allow, as I mentioned, the most economical design for space and storage. Now, actually, it's a good point you brought up that superconductors and magnetic, in order to produce their magnetic, quote unquote anti-gravitational field, must be circular in shape. That being so, it's definitely plausible to say that it could encompass the circumference of a circular craft, or the encompass multiple times around a very long-shaped craft, or a compass around the edges of a triangular-shaped craft. Point is, we really don't have. We can look at our aircraft. I shouldn't say aircraft. Our spacecraft, and their design. Their design's functional. You have, you want to keep them small enough. Not too small so that you can't live in it, but small enough to remain functional and ergonomical, yet at the same time have, if you've seen concepts for interplanetary aircraft, typically, spacecraft, they typically involve a giant rotating ring to provide gravity. Who's to say that if you can produce your own anti-gravity, who's to say you can't produce your own gravity too, and just make, any typical shape of vehicle that you want, and just fly around. And the point is, if you're not being bound by the laws of aerodynamics and the laws of design, if you're not being bound by the limitations of design, why not just make a generic looking aircraft?
Yeah, I just think that if you really can't compare NASA's spacecraft to our UFO craft, because if a alien civilization is visiting us and they're traveling across interstellar mediums and everything like that, they're in a completely different technology level than we could ever dream to comprehend in maybe the next 100 to 200 years even. We're on the cusp of becoming a Type 1 civilization in the next 50 to 100 years maybe, and if these civilizations are coming to us like this, they easily have to be at least a Type 2 civilization. Those of you who are not familiar with Type 1, Type 2, that kind of thing, there is such a thing called the Kardashev scale, and the Kardashev scale is a method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement. It's mostly based on the amount of energy that they consume and can develop. Type 1 civilization would be, which we'll be reaching hopefully soon, is that we can produce fusion power on a large scale, and that we can produce antimatter in a large scale, and we have almost completely renewable energy based by, say, solar cells, wind or hydroelectric power. A Type 2 civilization would be like a Dyson sphere, which is a hypothetical structure that would be to enclose a star completely and capture all of its energy. Exotic means to generate energy, like feeding things into a black hole and then collecting the photons emitted by it. Star lifting, which is literally removing a portion of a star's matter for their own uses. Antimatter, of course, white holes, if they exist. And even capturing the energy of gamma ray bursts, which would kill a Type 0 civilization. That would be it. But I digress. But yes, that's the kind of technology that we're working with. So we're just going to take another quick, about 3.5 minute break. When we get back, we'll finish up our discussion on Bob Lazar, and then we'll move on to Majestic 12, Project Serpo, and the Roswell incident. So thank you for listening, of course. And again, before we go to break, we're going to reiterate that you are welcome to call in, comment on the show, talk about your experiences, share your opinion on the show, or more. We are completely unscreened open lines, and if you have anything to share about the supernatural, the paranormal, the extraterrestrial, the unexplained, and the mysterious, we'll be just right back. Okay, and we're back. That was another sweet free bumper music that we found. Those two tracks, or that one track was If This Were an Emergency. So now that we're back, first I'd like to address something in chat. Justin in chat comments. I remember about 3 or 5 years ago, right behind my house in the sky, an orange globe that seemed to float or levitate, and some sort of jet activity afterwards that I had never seen at my house before following its departure. That sounds like a atypical UFO event. That's kind of like the telltale sign. I think it's usually a ball of light floating in the air and making unnatural movement across the air, and which normally don't make sense for normal aircraft to be able to do. Normally, when people see UFOs, they describe themselves as seeing vehicles in the air just making sudden stops after going breakneck speeds, going up and down and sideways and diagonals and upways and wonka ways and all the kind of different ways. So that's typical telltale sign of a UFO experience. Thanks for sharing your experience, Justin. I really appreciate it, and thank you for tuning in. And I'm really glad you're enjoying the show, because we really, really are. I have to say that it is really, really great to be back, and I'm really, really enjoying it. Radio has always been some sort of passion on doing. I really, really enjoy doing late night radio. This isn't late night, but it is late night. My dream is would always be to host a show from, say, 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. to about 2 a.m., which would be like my dream. But now that we're back, let's talk about let's finish up our talk about Bob Lazar. Overall, so just in a short one sentence, tell me yes or no, and why do you think Bob Lazar is credible or not credible?
If I needed to pick, I would say no. Reason being simply that, as a scientist, I believe you cannot accept something until you have overwhelming evidence of its plausibility. That's not to say that you can reject it. However, you can't. I mean, there's dozens of theories there, out there regarding, the very nature of the universe, this and that. There's quantum theories, everything. And you can't accept any single one of them until you have concrete evidence supporting the theory. Bob Lazar's, his theory seems to hold up. I can't, throw it out the window because of, A, insanity, or B, some sort of alibi, but at the same time, I can't accept it either. There's no other people who are also willing to stand out and stand by him and say, listen, no, the government told me to stay quiet about him, but here's the truth about him. There's no other people who are standing up and standing by him in such great quantity, enough to make it actual plausible testimony. Like I said, I won't discount him, but I can't accredit him either.
For me, I would have to go with it's hard to make a 100% certain determination, but if I had to make a thing, I would actually say that I think that he would be credible. Only based on the fact that when Rob called in and talked about MK Ultra, and then also discussed about how that's possible to brainwash people who have never ever, who have worked there and then decided to leave, and then they decided to say, you can leave, but you have to deal with this, and that would be the mind control or the brainwashing or whatever. Or they decided to take in these news reporters, and they have I'm sure they have the news in this country by the throat. And most of the media in this nation is controlled by said government. So who's to say that these scientists at these universities could have been bought off, or couldn't have been the records mysteriously wiped off? Any of that. So I'm going go with yes, that he is credible if I had to make an absolute yes or no decision.
Plus, one more thing I have to mention before we go on. Since Andy's not here, I have to kind of, throw that little bit of healthy dose of skepticism that he normally provides us.
I'm sure he's listening and he's going to laugh about that one.
But all right, so I mean, so you want to move on and talk about the Roswell incident first?
Let's go with I almost had a lisp there. Let's go with Majestic 12. Majestic 12 is a supposed code name of a secret committee of scientists, military commanders, government officials, formed in the 40s by an executive order by President Truman. So the purpose was to investigate the recovery of UFO at Roswell, New Mexico, during July 1947. Indication of the group's existence appeared in the 70s in these declassified Canadian documents, where it was actually referenced to a classified group called MJ12, and was also discovered in 1980, but that one was discovered to be a hoax. And then furthermore, in the mid 80s, documents were discovered in United States archives which closely resemble real declassified documents, but the FBI claims that they're completely bogus, but we all know the FBI, the NSA, the CIA are very good at hiding things. I'll actually read the one letter that mentions them. Dear Secretary Forrestal, which was the same Forrestal that served in World War II. As per our recent conversation on this matter, you are hereby authorized to proceed with all due speed and caution upon your undertaking. Hereafter, this matter shall be referred to only as Operation Majestic 12. It continues to be my feeling that any future considerations relative to the ultimate disposition of this matter rest solely within the office of the President, following appropriate discussions with yourself, Dr. Bush, and the Director of Central Intelligence. The theories about it would pretty much dictate that there is a bunch of people out there who all know about what really happened at Roswell, and that the membership of said MJ12 are such people as the first CIA director, Helen Coulter, Dr. Vannevar Bush, which was the chaired head of Office of Scientific Research and Development at the National Defense Research Committee, which is the predecessor of said committee. James Forrestal was the Secretary of the Navy, and then was also the first Secretary of Defense. General Vandenberg, he was part of the Central Intelligence Group. Rear Admiral Sidney Soares, which was the first director of said Central Intelligence Group. Dr. Donald Menzel was an astronomer. Dr. Berkner was a physicist. These people actually have connections to UFOs. Vandenberg oversaw investigations into so-called ghost rockets in Europe. Bush was implicated in 1950 Canadian documents talking about a highly secret UFO investigation with the Research and Development Board, which was also confirmed by a Canadian scientist named Wilbur B. Smith. Helen Coulter was on the board of directors above a powerful civilian UFO organization called NICAP, and made public statements to Congress about UFOs in 1960. So this is a very interesting topic. It's almost like it's an Illuminati type deal, I would say, except that instead of ruling the world, it's more like a committee of people who investigated the recovery of the UFO at Roswell. After you tell me what you think of this, we'll go into Roswell itself, and that and Project Serpo will probably take us through the rest of the program.
Well, after reading, all about the Majestic 12 on the page that you sent me, I really have to say that comparing directly the arguments for and the arguments against, I I mean, I really have to say that this seems to be a legitimate group, a legitimate operation that was conducted, and I mean, I haven't really gotten into so much the implications of what discoveries, if any, that they have made. However, I mean, there are plenty of arguments for, and honestly, it doesn't really look like there's all that much to doubt the existence of such a group. I mean, as you said, the FBI, quickly forms doubts about it. The documents themselves seem suspicious. There's let me see what else here. Several people discuss, Majestic 12 as a hoax. Not really anything that seemed to be that seems to be really credible in debunking the whole Majestic 12 operation. However, there is authenticity claiming otherwise. Say, for example, the Cutler memo was supposedly, the argument against was that the maker was the maker of the memo, Cutler, was out of the country at the time. However, his assistants typically would send out memos under his name, and the memo itself was in fact unsigned. There are many people who actually do attest to the existence of the Majestic 12. I'm actually just kind of skimming through all the arguments for right now, but I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't doubt that that the president would have authorized the creation of an elite task force, so to say, in order to investigate a situation that, I mean, honestly, very few people doubt, a situation that very few people doubt is very, very well covered up and very, very secretive. Nobody seems to truly know what happened. So that being said, it's actually very, very, very likely, in my opinion, that an organization like this would have existed at one point or another.
So let's get into Roswell. And we're definitely not going to get into all of Roswell tonight, as this is such a huge, absolutely massive topic that we could actually probably dedicate a entire show to. If you're not familiar with Roswell, which would actually be quite a shock, is an incident that took place in July 1947, where an airborne object crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. The official report is that it was a weather balloon was recovered by RAF, and it was a weather balloon that was pretty much testing the weather, swamp gas, whatever have you. The most famous explanation is that it was a spacecraft containing extraterrestrial life, and it's been the subject of movies, books, video games, everything under the sun. This is the biggest UFO incident in the entire world. It pretty interestingly enough, after it happened, it kind of just dropped off the radar for 30 years, and then until the 70s, where they said someone who was involved with the original recovery expressed his belief that the military covered it up, that it was a spacecraft. Then that spread, and then it was featured in some documentaries, and then it became huge. There are some people who put forth a personal account which claimed that alien autopsies were carried out at the Roswell military base, and that interestingly enough, there was actually a press release made by the personnel from the 509th Operations Group that recovered a flying disc which crashed on a ranch, and later that day, the 8th Air Force said that it was a weather balloon and updated the story. So that's the first eerie part of the whole thing.
there has been things about found footage of an alien autopsy. There has people who have come forth that said that they worked at the place and went through the wreckage. There is a photo held by General Ramey that has been the subject of tons of controversy, whether it can be you can make anything out of it, the picture. There's also now the measure which we introduced, the Majestic 12. There was a supposed FBI document from 1950 that just stated that there was an Air Force investigator stated that 3 so-called flying saucers and their occupants were recovered in New Mexico. And then, there's these all still relate back to Area 51, which some people claim that all these things were sent back to there, and there thus began all the back research and the reverse engineering, which led to a lot of technology we discovered today. So, why don't you share with your opinion, Miguel?
To be completely honest, my opinion on the Roswell incident is met with actually a lot more skepticism than I used to look at it with. Area 51, Roswell is, there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. A lot of people, everyone seems to have an opinion on it in one way, shape, or form. And the opinion typically seems to be, the government's hiding something. The government hid something. The government covered something up. And honestly, I believe that's simply because, 99.9% of the people you ask are all people who have never actually been there, people who have never spoke to first-hand viewers of the, so-called incident. Everybody seems to go on second-hand sources. And the fact that government hatred nowadays seems to be a recurring theme, and I'm not saying for, not without good reason. However, because it seems to be the cool thing to do is to automatically assume the government's up to something. Everyone always wants to say, Roswell, people saw a UFO crash, they saw, aliens, alien bodies, and they're just covering it up. That being said, I have several reasons to have a healthy dose of skepticism, aside from the fact that just everyone seems to fall into the big thing about Roswell. First of all, my big issue is with the General Ramey letter. Now, there's pictures and copies of the General Ramey letter on the internet. Supposedly, the whole issue surrounding that was that in a press release photo in which General Ramey and an assistant, I don't know honestly who it was holding the so-called weather balloon that was recovered. General Ramey is kneeling while holding a memo, and several lines of the memo can be read. And people have enhanced the footage of the memo to, see, for example, that it's, the date is 8th July 1947 from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Subject Roswell. Something acknowledging a disc was found at a location. That victims of the wreck were forwarded to Fort Worth. Aviators in the disc will ship for something. There's very, very few words that can actually be fully making out. And they seem to pull a whole message out of it. However, whether or not this is actually a smoking gun in the whole Roswell case, I really wouldn't believe so. Now, it does look a little bit suspicious that he's holding a letter that seems to have some strange-looking words on it. But, maybe it's just because I'm not, an expert on handwriting and making stuff out of, pulling words out of very, very, very blurry words. Maybe, the expert opinion, experts have really put this together. Maybe experts can really pull these words out of it, and using patterns and technology can actually find a coded message in there about a UFO and occupants. However, when I just look at it myself and I look at the quote-unquote enhanced image of the memo, I can't make out a single letter of the entire thing. There also seem to be multiple versions of the picture. There's some pictures I'm looking at that are just way too blurry to read, and then there's some ones that, I mean, I'm looking at an enhanced version. I can clearly read the words Fort Worth. Now, is that to say that there are more than one versions of the same picture, or is that to say that somebody has enhanced the picture and made it viral in order to read what it is that needs to be read, or that they would like us to read? Because honestly, I mean, I'm looking at a whole picture of the entire letter, the original line, and the little bits and pieces that they pulled out of it. It just looks like one big ink smear. There's really nothing you could see, even if you squint. I mean, maybe here and there I can pull out a little bits and pieces of a word. But as I mentioned before, who's to say that these images weren't tampered with in the first place? And in fact, I believe I may have even mentioned something similar to that in the original Roswell episode that we did several years back. Now that being said, I'm not gonna go ahead and say, yeah, I agree with the military, it was a weather balloon. I agree with so and so, it was this and that. But there have been a lot of incidents in which a UFO was mistaken for something or other, whether it's a weather balloon or the infamous swamp gas excuse. But I mean, unless I can speak to many individuals who either have a first-hand experience, or at this point they're people who have spoken to them, or taped interviews with them, or transcripted interviews, I'd really have to look at with some skepticism. It's something I want to believe. I want to say there's a big cover-up going on, but I mean it honestly just looks to the point that it's such people try to make it out to be so obvious that something is being covered up, that that at that point, honestly, it would make the government look foolish to even keep denying it. It's like if you have hard, solid proof in front of your face and you keep denying it, it just makes you look foolish. And at that point, I would have to say, wait a minute, if we have this much evidence and there's still a big denial going on, maybe I should question some of the people making claims about this evidence. Now, I'm not saying that because I don't want to believe. As I said, I do. In a way, I do. I'm very interested in, UFOs, UFO technology, historical UFO incidents, but I don't want to go ahead and just jump the gun and say, look, this is a confirmed, report. Unless I can speak to someone who can tell me for a fact they know they saw something that was not a weather balloon. They know they worked in the government. They saw an alien body. I mean, several bits and pieces of evidence were even exposed as hoaxes. The famous alien autopsy footage made by where's his name on here? Mr. Ray Santilli, who was an entrepreneur, a video entrepreneur. Supposedly, it caused when it was released in '95, it caused a huge sensation that this was footage of an autopsy on an alien body recovered at Roswell. Now, in 2006, he also admitted that the film was a reconstruction, however, claimed that it was based on genuine footage that was lost, or yet that some of the original frames have survived. Now, honestly, at that point, I can't take that evidence one way or the other. Maybe he admitted it was reconstruction. Maybe he was forced to admit that. Maybe it was real, and someone just pulled, the government just pulled some young individual and said, listen, our footage is out. We're going to tell you, you're going to go out in public saying that it was your footage and that you, and that you were the one responsible for it, and then you're going to say that it was reconstruction. You can't doubt anything. I mean, hell, for all I know, you could say that that Roswell was an incident fabricated by the government in order to get us to distract our attention from something else. I mean, the theories are virtually limitless. So that being said, I mean, aside from the eyewitness accounts, there's very little I can actually take at face value and truly believe. Would I like to visit Roswell? Would I like to visit Area 51 and take a look for myself and speak to some of the people there? Yeah, sure. Do I feel like it'd be a little bit difficult to siphon out the true stories from those who are like, yeah, I got abducted, back in '05, in my garage from an alien who said to meet me here 20 years later? I mean, is it going to be difficult to siphon out the true stories from the crazies? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I mean, if I can get some hard facts, some people who say, listen, this was the night, my mother said that she saw this, I was really young at the time, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that might, just not even the story, but the genuine belief might sway me some way or the other.
I can completely empathize with that skepticism, but there is so much that the government has been proved to be completely unreliable when it comes to hiding things or lying about things. I mean, look at the whistleblowing by Edward Snowden. Look at the cables that were released by WikiLeaks about how, for years Obama and Bush claimed that there was no official death toll in Iraq, but lo and behold, there was. This is much bigger than that. So like I said, I completely understand your skepticism, but there's so many people saying that, listen, I was there. I might have even touched the parts that were on the ground. There was someone who described in the July edition of Roswell that said that there was nothing to indicate that it was an engine. They said it was more or less a weather balloon, but there are also people who talked about it being a the material is being examined were odd, didn't quite seem Earth-like. And then there's the glaring thing that the first press release by the personnel from the people who originally had talked about it talked about recovering a flying disc which crashed. What do you think about that? That the first report that came out was that they had found a flying saucer, and then immediately retracted, saying, no, this was actually a weather balloon. That seemed very fishy to me.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, that, supposedly their first claim was, oh, hey, we saw this, and all of a sudden, maybe, out of someone else's intervention, made them change that statement. I think that's one of those few shreds of evidence that's very, very, makes the situation very plausible. Now, that being said, it also goes to say, maybe the claim in the first place could have been a little unfounded. Maybe they thought they saw something that was in a disc-shaped crash, and I mean, it could have simply been something else. However, like I mentioned before, could I truly, honestly believe that it could have been something like a weather balloon? I mean, would the military be sent out to the middle of the desert to recover a weather balloon? I mean, let's be completely honest here. Whatever crash, I do not fully believe could have been a weather balloon of any sort of nature. Now, do I believe it could have been a military black project? Possibly. Do I believe it could have been a UFO? Also possible. Now, considering this was the day before black projects really started to surface, I mean, this is a day when our primary air superiority fighter was still the P-51 Mustang, propeller aircraft. So do I really feel some sort of aircraft that could not have been recognized as propeller-powered or jet-powered even for that matter could have crashed and people wouldn't have said, oh yeah, I heard the sound of a propeller winding down or the roar of a turbine engine. No. I mean, it definitely probably feels like something is up. Something crashed that the government did not want us to know about, and still to this day does not want us to know about. And that is where my skepticism kind of clears up a little bit. Like I said, there's bits and pieces like that make me want to believe. Yet, at the same time, I've learned in recent years, as in doing my own research and such, that I can't accept or reject anything until I have first-person claims for myself. I mean, I feel that this may be going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I feel I can't even accept lessons learned in a college lecture over, this law of physics, that law of physics, let's say the photoelectric effect. Things like that you can't take for granted until you observe an experiment, thus being labs, proving as such. That's why I feel labs and hands-on work are very valuable very valuable learning tools. Now, that same principle, as I mentioned, also applies to such things as very skeptical, incidents that could be taken with some skepticism, such as anything where there's a cover-up, there's some sort of proven lies involved, and Roswell is one of those such incidents. Like I said, I can't reject it. I can't say there's no UFOs involved. There was, it was some military aircraft or something like that. However, I am saying that if you were to have me give some sort of statistical probabilities as to what I think it was, I would have to say UFO would probably be the highest statistical probability. Would it be necessarily a majority probability? No. However, I feel that it would definitely be one of, if not the highest probability of being what truly happened.
All right. Well, now that we're down to our last about 20 minutes, let's get to the last topic, and that's Project Serpo. Okay. Project Serpo is an alleged top-secret program that was an exchange program between the government of the United States and aliens from a distant planet called Serpo, which was located in Zeta Reticuli system, which is why I said before it would actually come into importance later on. 12 apparent humans were supposedly had traveled to the planet in 1965, while one alien remained in their plans, in the place on Earth. The project is allegedly said to have begun when the Roswell crash happened. There was a surviving alien, and the government took them in, treated them well, and rehabilitated them, and initiated contact. And then from there, they contacted their other species, and then they initiated this contact with the U.S. government. The information about this first came to light in 2005 when a email list moderated by Victor Martinez, going under an anonymous name, claimed to be a retired senior official with the United States Defense Intelligence Agency, and talked about the project. An alien abductee named Whitley Strieber told of an incident that took place at a UFO conference, saying that an elderly gentleman approached him and said that if he could prove that he was from another planet, saying only one word after that, Serpico. And then Whitley Strieber says he may have misheard the man, and any word could have been Serpo. So there have been several references to this project over the course of the years. This is usually roped in with MJ-12 and Roswell. There is a website dedicated to it called Serpo.org, which has cataloged all the context regarding the Serpo case. Apparently, there is a rumor, or not. Sorry, that was probably a poor word for it. A theory that, not a theory. I guess like a theory or such that most of these pilots died, depending on whether the environment which they were sent to, not to say that they were sent to, say, an inhabitable world and they didn't have any oxygen masks. No, it was just like maybe the gravity, or maybe the environment was hostile, or something or the other, and that most of these have died. So that's the explanation to why none of these pilots or astronauts or whatever have never come forward with the information. So let's go to you, Miguel, and let's talk about what do you think about this one.
Well, I'm just looking through the whole claim section of the Project Serpo page that you sent me, and immediately one thing that sticks out to me is the fact that, and I mean, there's certain things I look for in terms of skepticism, things that kind of just throw up a red flag in my head. A lot of the logic seems pretty sound, to be honest. For example, that the person who leaked this information, Victor Martinez, supposedly claimed that he had information of the Roswell crash. He talked about how there were 2 crash sites. How there were a certain amount of beings inside who either died or this or that or blah blah blah. However, the thing that just throws up a red flag is he doesn't go into great detail about his past, as he mentions. However, things seem to, his entire story, just everything seems to be either a little bit convenient or too specific. For example, he not only claims to, let's see here, he says, that the government learned of the planet, so-called Serpo, which is a little bit weird, to me in the first place, that, he's going to, give exactly the name of the planet, the exact population. Here he says it was around 650,000 alien beings. Talked about how many individuals were on the Roswell. I mean, first of all, I think it's a big deal to just simply reveal the true nature of what happened in Roswell. He not only reveals the true information about Roswell, but doesn't even go into great detail about it. I mean, it's obvious the public wants to know what happened at Roswell, but he just pretty much says, yeah, the crash involved two extraterrestrial craft. They crashed here and there, and then we got them, talked to them, and then goes on to the whole Project Serpo thing. Just kind of brushes the whole Roswell truth aside to talk about Project Serpo. And then, like I was mentioning, the red flag to me, how everything's a little bit too convenient. He talks about how the supposed 12 humans that went to this alien planet supposedly remained there for longer than the 10 years that they were originally supposed to, where 2 died, 2 remained, and of the 8 that have returned, all of them have died. Now, that being said, they all died prior to the release of this information. Additionally, they were isolated for what looks like a good little, about 6 years at various military installations. So in other words, following their return to Earth, they stayed at military installations for a couple of years and then died, and then after everyone was dead, then he decided to disclose this information. Now, whether that could be possibly out of respect, possibly out of working with the people involved's wishes, I don't know. However, like I said, everything just feels a little bit too. Everything feels a little bit too convenient. Everything feels a little bit too precise. However, especially for a project that would be, possibly kept under such wraps that, an actual archive, a file of statistics and facts about such an operation would have probably been destroyed, or probably wouldn't have existed in the first place. I mean, the government's not going to keep an archive on a project, in which we're sending people to an alien planet just, for anyone to be able to, get into their system and disclose. And then, like I said, the last thing was just simply the fact that he gives specifics on the truth of what happened at Roswell, yet seems to just brush it off a little bit too easily. He doesn't even seem to really acknowledge the fact that he's giving us the truth about what happened at Roswell. He just says, I won't go into any details about my past. I was involved in a program. Roswell, it occurred. There were 2 crash sites. They involved 2 aircraft. And then we reported the crash, and we found an extraterrestrial. That's pretty much, all he says. And then the rest of the whole report is just everything regarding Project Serpo. They also mentioned how there was one alien being who remained here. I don't really see any explanation of what happened to that individual. All they mention is the one alien that survived did end up dying here. So I mean, I really can't, aside from the dead alien, live alien thing, I really can't draw any comparisons between this and any other claims that have been made before. Like, for example, the Bob Lazar thing. Bob Lazar, we had an idea what was going on at Area 51. People have seen UFOs there. People have seen strange aircraft taken off. When like we talked about the whole anti-gravity, possible superconductors, the strange electrical fields that UFOs supposedly leave behind. Bob Lazar's claims seem to have parallels. The whole Project Serpo claims really don't seem to have any parallels that I can draw with any other claims at all. I mean, I haven't heard of someone coming out before and saying, hey, listen, my neighbor who just died, supposedly was saying that he went to an alien planet and was talking about it. And, I didn't hear, anyone else claiming to step out and say, hey, look, I knew anything about this incident, which, again, could be because of fear of retaliation by the government, fear of having their credibility destroyed by the government. I mean,
if the government's this far-reaching and this is powerful as it is, and you kind of, if you were someone who was involved in some of these top-secret things, and they would pretty much go to you and say, whatever you say down here leaks out to the public in some way or another, and we found out that you're the one who did it. Your family dead, your family ruined, you dead, you ruined, your career is done. That's possibly what could be happening to these guys who actually do come out and say, like Victor Martinez and Paul Benowitz and all these people. Maybe there are other, Paul Benowitz he died in 2003. But these people could easily be scared, and because if the government's this powerful enough to be in contact with extraterrestrials and in this depth of contact, then who's to say they don't have any sorts of other technology they've taken from these extraterrestrials or exchanged with these extraterrestrials, to say that that they didn't brainwash anybody, or maybe there's something we didn't even discuss entirely about the disinformation. Disinformation is everything. Being able to leak something so people are so and so people are so delusioned that that can't be real, that disinformation works. Like in terms of people who think that science fiction films and novels are actually disinformation leaked by the government in order to make you either soften you up for the one-day reveal that aliens do exist, or even just say that, oh man, that can never happen. That's in science fiction. That'll never happen. It's too ridiculous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. One other thing I was going to mention, actually, after further reading this, there actually is, contrary to what I said, a little bit of support. Not really all that much. I believe you mentioned earlier of a supposed alien abductee at a UFO conference, spoke to an elderly gentleman who supposedly said that he was from another planet and only uttered the word Serpico, which may have been mistaken for Serpo. However, there's also a retired special agent who lent support to the story, saying he was skeptical, but later heard rumors from contacts that said the story was true. Now, that being said, there is a little bit of parallels being drawn here. Yet the story, in my opinion, seems to have kind of materialized out of nowhere. I mean, to be honest, if I really, really gave the effort, I mean, I could right now fabricate and release, an email to a UFO mailing list, claiming, I don't know, that our government is actually developing a use of antimatter weaponry that will be employed in covert warfare sometime in the future, and that I was involved in the situation. And it could come out, and there would be people who I could either convince or who would, all on their own, want to say they support it. And that's all I'm trying to do is just inject a little bit of skepticism into the situation. I'm actually very much more inclined to believe Roswell, and even more so inclined to believe a lot of the claims about Area 51 than I am Project Serpo. Project Serpo is actually probably, being kind of a little bit convenient being the end of the night, is the one thing that I probably would be most truly skeptical about.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like I said, skepticism is a natural human emotion, and that's what brings us to, being wary of the government and being wary of their actions, and being wary of the official story saying, "Oh, no, extraterrestrials do not exist. This doesn't exist. We're not doing anything. We're not listening to your phone calls." You know what I mean? Skepticism is a natural thing, and that's fantastic. But me, I am skeptical of things, but I also like to believe in digging up the truth. And we only begin to touch the surface tonight of all these topics. Of even just talking about. We only skimmed the surface of Roswell. We only skimmed the surface of Area 51, and we only skimmed the surface of this entire topic. So, this is something we can go into time and time again. So we're down to our last 5 minutes, so I'm just going to do some quick announcements, and then we're going to go into our outro, and then we'll be done for the evening. I really, really enjoyed our first show back, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to our first show back, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed it as well. If you care to like us on Facebook, it is www.facebook.com/Phantom Nebula Radio, all pushed together. You could like us on there, check out pictures, news stories that we might post, things like that, and also when we are live, upcoming events, upcoming shows, and you can leave your comments there. You could leave your comments and any suggestions if you want to hear a show. Be my guest on there to check it out and see what you have to think. We would love to take opinions on future shows because we love to please. We love to please you. We want you to tell us what you think and what you think of the show. So pop in and tell us what you think, what you want to hear, and anything else. So tune in tomorrow again at the same time for another 2-hour show. The topic will be announced sometime tonight, early tomorrow. So thank you again for listening. I really, really had a great time, and I hope you do again. So thank you for checking us out. This is Phantom Nebula Radio, the home of the extraterrestrial, the supernatural, the paranormal, the unexplained, and the mysterious.